And so what we're doing in this letter is saying, we have these other data that have come out, and we're asking the FDA to conduct additional studies of real world data on mifepristone to see what are the complication rates, what does that look like in the real world now that it has been on the market for 25 years in the United States, and with all of these concerns about the complications that surround it.
Welcome to Caring for Both, a curbside consult series by the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists, or AAPLOG. On this podcast, we bring on experts to provide insights to support you as a medical professional in your life-affirming practice and career. I'm your host for today, Dr. Christina Francis. I'm a board-certified OBGYN and also CEO of AAPLOG. There's been a lot going on in our country in the last several months, from a U.S. Supreme Court decision allowing pro-life states to finally defund Planned Parenthood, to an AAPLOG-led letter to the FDA urging them to reinstate basic safeguards on the abortion drug mifepristone. There's just been a lot going on to help promote life-affirming medicine, life-affirming healthcare for our patients that ultimately protects both our pregnant and our preborn patients. And there's been so much going on that we thought that we should bring on Rebecca Weaver, AAPLOG's amazing Director of Advocacy and Policy, so that we can check in with you guys. It's been a little while since we did this. I think it was the beginning of the year, the last time we did one of these check-ins. And we want to get you caught up on some of the important things that have been happening in our nation's capital that ultimately impact all Americans, as well as some differently on different state levels, but also impacts our ability to provide life-affirming healthcare to our patients. So we're so excited to get you caught up. We've got several things to go through today. So Rebecca, thanks so much for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
So let's start out with one of the things that I'm the most excited about, and that is an AAPLOG-led letter from several medical organizations to the HHS Secretary, Secretary Kennedy, and to the FDA Commissioner, Dr. Marty Makary. Rebecca, can you just tell our listeners a little bit about that letter and what led to us deciding that it was time to send it?
Yeah, absolutely. So this letter is a medically driven letter. There's lots of letters that are sent to the FDA and to HHS, and they're all important, but we really wanted to lead on this letter and make it medically focused. In total, we have 30,000 medical professionals. So with all these groups sending this letter, again, to the commissioner and to the HHS secretary to really highlight the dangers of mifepristone. We've seen recent data and papers coming out looking at what some of the complications are regarding mifepristone, and they actually seem to be a lot higher than the FDA claims. They seem to be 22 times higher. And so what we're doing in this letter is saying, we have these other data that have come out, and we're asking the FDA to conduct additional studies of real world data on mifepristone to see what are the complication rates, what does that look like in the real world now that it has been on the market for 25 years in the United States, and with all of these concerns about the complications that surround it. Additionally, in our letter, we're asking for a reinstatement of the pre-2016 REMS. So these are things like that mifepristone not be used past 7 weeks gestation, in-person dispensing, that all adverse events be reported, not just death, but all. And that's part of the reason there's been this confusion about what the complications actually look like and what the rate actually is. And then also asking that a requirement for ultrasound be included in the REMS to determine the gestational age for appropriateness of use of the abortion pill. And so we're really excited about this letter. We hope it will lead to some good change and some good data collection and ultimately protecting our patients more fully. Obviously, we want to protect our preborn patients, but certainly the women who are taking these drugs need to have fully informed consent about what is going on, what are the complications they could potentially experience, and we hope this letter will lead to some of that.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm really, as you said, I'm so excited about this letter because it is the first letter to come from all medical organizations calling the FDA to do a more in-depth look into the safety of mifepristone. specifically the safety in the way that it's being dispensed currently, where women are able to go online and order these drugs without any interaction, any meaningful interaction whatsoever with any kind of medical professional. And as you said, we don't know how far along they are then when they're taking these drugs. There's already been multiple documented cases of women taking these drugs at home, even into the second and even early third trimester. We don't know when these drugs are being ordered online who they're going to. Again, there's been multiple documented cases of abusers ordering these drugs and then slipping them into their victims' drinks to cause an abortion that woman or girl didn't want. And of course, there's the cases out of Texas and Louisiana where they're suing the abortionist in New York who's been shipping these pills online. The one in Louisiana, I think, is especially egregious. It was a teenage girl who was pregnant and actually wanted her baby, but her mom was not happy that she was not getting an abortion. So her mom ordered mifepristone and misoprostol from this abortionist in New York and forced them on her daughter, her teenage daughter, who then ended up in the emergency room with complications that we know are happening. And so, we feel as a medical organization, this isn't just about being opposed to abortion. Of course we're opposed to the use of mifepristone because it ends the life of our preborn patient. But we also believe that women, even if they make an abortion decision, deserve better health care than this. This is really, we've said it multiple times, it's medical malpractice, the way these drugs are being dispensed. And I personally, as an OBGYN, feel like there's no reason that any physician should support the drugs being dispensed like this with no follow-up for women. Women are being abandoned to their local emergency rooms. And, I practice in Indiana where abortion is largely illegal. And yet my group is seeing these complications on a regular basis, including very severe and life-threatening complications like severe infections. That had the women not shown up to our emergency room when they did, they very well could have lost their lives. Like women like Alana Dixon and Amber Thurman and Candy Miller have lost their lives from complications from these drugs. And, I think the final thing I want to point out is that ACOG, the American College of OBGYNs, along with the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine and the Society for Family Planning, have petitioned the FDA not to listen to these kind of requests to reinstate safeguards around these drugs. They are, and I think it's important for people to understand what it is that they are advocating for. They're advocating for abusers then to be able to get their hands on these drugs and force them on women. They are advocating for no ultrasounds to rule out ectopic pregnancy, which we all know are common and life-threatening to women. They're advocating for women not even to have actually fully informed consent, like you said, Rebecca, because we can't possibly give a woman her specific risk related to this drug if we don't know how far along she is, if we don't know, if she's Rh negative or Rh positive. This is pure medical malpractice that they're advocating for. And so one thing I would say, and I know we're going to have some calls to action at the end, but one thing I would say is for anyone listening who's still an ACOG member or a member of SMFM or a member of any other medical organization that is advocating against these safeguards to be put back into place, I'd encourage you to reach out to that organization and tell them why you think this is so dangerous for women. So we are really hopeful, aren't we, Rebecca, that this letter coming from 30,000 medical professionals will make an impact and that the FDA will do what Commissioner McCary has said they are open to doing, which is to review the safety data, when evidence presented itself, which it did. So we're hoping that they will take this very seriously for the health and the safety of all of our patients.
Yeah, certainly. And I think because Commissioner McCary is a medical professional himself, we're hoping that this just, speaks to him in a very specific way. And also, I think just to highlight, obviously abortion pills are dangerous regardless of if they're used in one situation or in 100%. But over the years recently, we have seen the use of abortion-inducing drugs increase substantially. It's now the 63% of abortions are drug-induced, and it's only going to increase with some of the other federal updates that we're going to talk about later. That use is only going to increase. And so trying to address this now as soon as we can is hugely important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so important, again, for the health and safety of our patients. And I think also for anyone who wants to know more about the recent data that came out, there was a large data set from insurance claims data, an analysis of that was released a couple of months ago. And we actually did a full podcast episode on that. And so if you just go back a few episodes, you'll find that I had Dr. Donna Harrison on, and we talked in depth about that data and why we actually were not surprised by the results of that analysis that showed that nearly 11%, nearly 1 in 9 women who take these drugs have a serious complication after taking them that requires that they go to the emergency room and be treated. And so this is why we're calling on the FDA, because they need to be looking at real world data. And we were not surprised because it's what we and all of our members are seeing in our own practices. And so we are calling for better healthcare for women. And again, I would invite anybody who's listening to this who's not in agreement with us even on the issue of abortion, but believes that women deserve better care than this, to join us in this ask of the FDA to reinstate those essential safeguards.
Right.
All right, so moving on to the next exciting piece of news that came out just within the last couple of weeks. Rebecca, the Supreme Court ruled on a case of, I believe it was Medina versus Planned Parenthood. It might have been the other way around. But basically, the state of South Carolina had passed a law saying that they didn't want their tax dollars to fund abortions and fund abortion providers. And that was appealed up to the Supreme Court. And tell everybody what happened with that ruling and why we're so excited about that.
Yeah, definitely. So AAPLOG actually filed an amicus brief in this case. And exactly as you said, Medina does come first, Medina versus Planned Parenthood. And the Supreme Court ruled that yes, states can remove Planned Parenthood as a Medicaid provider. And Medicaid is the largest way in which Planned Parenthood receives revenue from the federal government. And so allowing states to remove them as a Medicaid provider, no longer having to send taxpayer dollars to abortion providers, specifically Planned Parenthood, is huge. Now, some states already have disqualified Planned Parenthood as a Medicaid provider. In my home state of Texas, Planned Parenthood is not a Medicaid provider. So this case really focuses on those other states that wanted to remove Planned Parenthood and were blocked for whatever reason. And so those adverse lower court decisions now are reversed and allow states, as you said, like South Carolina, other states that want to remove Planned Parenthood from receiving those Medicaid reimbursements, they can actually do that now. And so this is so important. It's going to open up the opportunity again with the Dobbs decision a couple of years ago, returning the issue of abortion to the states. This just reiterates that it is up to states now. They can take action to remove Planned Parenthood as a Medicaid provider and make sure their taxpayer dollars are not going to paying for abortions or and I guess that's something to clarify too, right? In these Medicaid reimbursements, the money isn't actually going to pay for abortions directly, but it's going to Planned Parenthood to reimburse other services. Well, money is fungible. And so if it's going to Planned Parenthood, and Planned Parenthood is the largest provider of abortions in our country, that money is ultimately subsidizing abortions. And that's something that the majority of Americans do not want. And so this is a great victory for pro-life states and pro-life individuals, certainly, but also for individuals who just don't want their money to be subsidizing an abortion industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and there was all kinds of outcries from the pro-abortion side of if we were able to defund Planned Parenthood, then all of these women, largely women from minority neighborhoods or lower socioeconomic level neighborhoods, which I think is important to point out that that's exactly who Planned Parenthood targets,
right.
Would then have a lack of access to healthcare. Well, in the state of South Carolina, where this case came out of, there are a total of 2 Planned Parenthood facilities. So there are 2 Planned Parenthood facilities that are no longer going to be receiving Medicaid dollars from the state of South Carolina versus, I forget the exact number in South Carolina, of federally qualified health centers that these same women could go and receive care from and receive truly comprehensive health care. But across the country, federally qualified health centers outnumber Planned Parenthood facilities 15 to 1. And
right.
so, I think the really exciting thing about this too, in addition to not subsidizing induced abortion, which carries no health benefits for either of our patients, in addition to that, now these funds are going to be freed up to actually fund good comprehensive health care for women that truly need it. And so this was a really important win that the Supreme Court recognized that states should have the ability to do this, to determine where their tax dollars are going to be spent. And, especially for states that abortion is an illegal procedure, why should tax dollars be subsidizing an illegal procedure? So, yeah, very, very exciting news that we were very happy to hear. And as you said, AAPLOG filed an amicus brief in that case. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's basically additional information from experts or anyone who's interested in a Supreme Court case that helps the justices make their decision. Because actually, the oral arguments for a case are very short. Only about an hour of arguments. And so the justices depend on information coming in from outside experts and other people who have interest. And so you can go to our website actually to find out more about other amicus briefs that we filed in other cases. It's sort of somewhat tied to this on a similar thread of Planned Parenthood. I'm sure, unless you have been sleeping under a rock for the last few weeks, you probably know that President Trump on the 4th of July signed into law his one big, beautiful bill. But Rebecca, of course, there's a lot in that bill, certainly much of which is outside of our purview at AAPLOG. But can you tell our listeners what is pertinent to, the issue of abortion that was in the One Big Beautiful Bill, which is actually history making?
Right. So yes, this pairs so well with the Supreme Court case we just talked about. But the One Big Beautiful Bill, it also has been going by the reconciliation bill. There's a lot of different moving budget pieces, but those are the same thing. And yeah, just signed into law by President Trump. But this bill, for the first time, includes defunding Planned Parenthood for a year. And I know that doesn't seem like very long, and it, not as long as we would all want, but it's a huge victory because there have been multiple attempts by multiple Congresses to defund Planned Parenthood, and every attempt has failed. And this time we were able to actually get it across the finish line. This is, and it's just thanks to Speaker Mike Johnson and Senator John Thune leading on the Senate side, who prioritize this, and it's so important. It means that for this year that Planned Parenthood is defunded of 800 million taxpayer dollars. And we know from what they've said and from what Democrats have said that means 200 clinics across the country are going to close. Now, one of the benefits of a defund, even for 1 year, is that when 200 clinics close, you can't just start those back up, overnight. And so this is going to have long-term downstream effects for making sure, again, like you said, Dr. Francis, that money is actually going to life-affirming medical centers that want to provide comprehensive healthcare and comprehensive well-being for women and for families. And so, yeah, we're so excited that this defunding of Planned Parenthood actually got across the finish line this time. And it does pair so well with that Supreme Court case of, again, allowing states to remove that money from Planned Parenthood as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think let's point out a couple of things, because I know, from what I'm hearing chatter online from both sides of the issue, actually, from the pro-life side and the pro-abortion side. First off, I want to reiterate what you said about thanking Speaker Mike Johnson on the House side and Senate Majority Leader John Thune on the Senate side, both of whom were amazing champions for life throughout this entire process and continue to be. And we know, I can't even imagine what that fight was like to get that through. And so we just really want to thank both of them and all of the members of Congress in both the House and the Senate who stood with them on this issue in particular, despite so much pushback from colleagues, I'm sure, and from those who are advocating for abortion. So we want to say thank you for their strength, for their courage. And we certainly would ask Congress to now take this up as an issue in this even separate processes, that maybe we can defund them for even longer in the future. But as you said, this is a historic event that happened, that we finally were able to defund the largest abortion provider in the country, which is amazing. The other thing that I'm hearing on the pro-abortion side is, now Why are you celebrating that 200 clinics might close? Women can't receive cancer screenings and STI testing and contraception and all of that. Again, federally qualified health centers outnumber Planned Parenthood facilities across the country 15-1. The only service that Planned Parenthood provides that women cannot get at federally qualified health centers are elective induced abortions. So that is the only thing that is going to be going away for women when these close. And Planned Parenthood still likes to cling to that ridiculous statistic that abortion is only 3% of what they do. Well, guess how they could have maintained their funding through this bill? If they gave up doing elective induced abortions, which if it was only 3% of what they did, that shouldn't have been too hard to give up, but they will not give it up. And so because of that, they will lose this funding. So yeah.
Right. And their annual report shows year after year that those other services they provide is going down. That is not the majority of what they do by any means. Their internal reports are very clear about that. So you're just absolutely right. And that ties into other, and we don't need to go into this because there's enough federal news to not go into other things, but with the Title X funding, that's part of the reason that they no longer in certain places receive that funding, because they won't give up doing elective abortions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if Planned Parenthood truly cared about the health of women and didn't care just about abortion, they would give up doing abortion so that they could continue to provide those other services, which, as you said, have decreased year over year. And, one thing I saw said, now women won't be able to access prenatal and postpartum care. Planned Parenthood does not provide prenatal and postpartum care. In fact, 9 out of 10 women who walk into Planned Parenthood pregnant come out having had abortions. If they truly cared about providing essential prenatal care services, that would not be the statistic. So I think it's really important for people to be aware what Planned Parenthood is truly all about, and that they would have had the option of maintaining this funding if they truly cared about women's health. All they had to do is give up doing abortions, which of course they're not going to do. So right. Huge win that we have defunded them of this much money, which will be, I think, additive, right? If you combine some states defunding them as well, then that's
right.
even taking even more of a hit. So
right.
So huge news for life-affirming healthcare and for the safety of both of our patients, both mom and baby. So we're very excited about that and hopeful that we'll see even more of this to come in the coming years. The final thing I want to talk about is something we are so excited about because we care so much at AAPLOG about the next generation of medicine, of life-affirming medicine. And we know that our medical students and residents are facing such immense pressure in their training to perform abortions or to endorse abortions. And a big part of that is because of a change that the ACGME, the American Council on Graduate Medical Education, who accredits all residency training programs in the country, a change that they made in 2018. When I was in my training, abortion training was opt-in. And it was that way for decades. So it was not standard training, but if you as a resident wanted abortion training, then you told your program and they figured out a way for you to get that. In 2018, end of 2018, they made a very crucial, but I think very insidious change because many people didn't realize the impact it was going to have, from abortion training being opt-in to being opt-out. And so now it's considered standard training. And if someone doesn't want to do it, the lowly intern has to have enough courage to stand up to their upper level residents and their attendings and say, I know this is standard training, but I don't want to do it. And we know that this sets up a very coercive environment. And so AAPLOG has been working very hard over the last several years to try and affect change to this policy from the ACGME to better protect medical students and residents. And we're making some headway. So Rebecca, share with everybody our exciting news.
Yeah, so we've been working on this in a lot of different fronts to try to combat it. But the most recent update we have, the most exciting one currently, is that so we have been working with congressional leaders on the House side to try to make sure that this language about utilizing funding to shift abortion training from opt-out to opt-in is included in the fiscal year 26 budget. Again, this is separate from the one big beautiful bill reconciliation. This is like how we would fund the government year by year. And so we've been pushing to include this language. It was included last year on the House side, so we're pushing to get it included again. And then we saw that the President Trump released his budget, his proposed budget for fiscal year 26. And this budget is important because it informs a lot of what ends up in the congressional budget, what they end up passing and including. And for the first time, the president's budget included a provision of utilizing utilizing funding to shift abortion training from opt-out to opt-in, exactly the language we have been working on. And so we're so grateful for the inclusion of this language in the president's proposed budget. That's huge and is going to have a huge impact, we hope, on what Congress decides to do. At the same time, on the House side, we've had some leaders like Representative Onder working on a member letter, again, encouraging inclusion of this language. So we're just getting some great momentum about including this language, again, to protect the conscience rights of medical students who don't want to receive abortion training, who don't want to participate in that. And whether, if it shifts back to opt-in, like you said, it's still going to be available. It's not like you can't be trained in abortion anymore, but it's no longer setting up a coercive environment. And it's making sure we honor the conscience rights of medical trainees. And that's whether it's coming from a pro-life conviction or just a conviction that you don't want to be trained in that. You shouldn't have to explain where that conscientious objection is coming from. And so we're going to continue pushing on this language and hopeful that it will be included in the House proposed budget. And ultimately, in the final budget, they might get to President Trump. And there's a lot of moving pieces before then. And so we're just going to keep working away, but would certainly, we'll talk about this in a minute, would love anyone's help who wants to advocate for inclusion of this language. And it's really easy to advocate. You don't have to go to Capitol Hill if you don't want to. We can make it easy for you.
Absolutely. Well, and just to highlight how this works, I'm sure most physicians listening realize that residency programs in large part are funded through state and federal dollars that come through Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements and things like that. And so this would address the federal funding for residency programs, that it essentially would say, if you want to continue to receive your federal funding, you have to offer abortion training as an opt-in option, not as an opt-out option. And we have actually good legal standing to ask for this because we have an official opinion from an attorney general here in the US that said that actually this opt-out requirement is in violation of something called the Coates-Snow Amendment, which is a federal conscience protection. So in requiring abortion as opt-out training, the ACGME is actually requiring residency programs to violate federal law. And so, it certainly is within the rights of the federal government to say, if you're violating federal law, then we're not going to give you funding. And so we're very hopeful there's good legal standing, at least from my understanding as a physician, not as a lawyer, but good legal standing to be asking for this. And as Rebecca said, this doesn't mean that we're taking away abortion training. It would still be available for anyone who wanted it in the way that it was for decades before ACGME made this change. So this should be something that people on both sides of the issue of abortion support. We know that the vast majority of the American public is opposed to physicians being forced to participate in abortions, which is exactly what this opt-out requirement does. And the other thing is, this opt-out requirement ignores the fact that 76 to 93% of OBGYNs don't do abortions. As you said, Rebecca, it may not even be that they're pro-life. It may just be that they're not interested in participating in that for whatever reason. And so they shouldn't be forced to do that. And we should not be financing people being forced to do this either. So we are very excited about this. It is so common sense. And again, should be something that reaches across the aisle. And so, on that line, let's move into wrapping up with, Rebecca, what are some things that life-affirming medical professionals out there who are listening or watching this can do to support life-affirming medicine, or even just to support things that make sense for our patients, like safeguards on the abortion pill and not forcing medical trainees to do abortions?
Yeah. So if you go to aplogaction.org, that's our advocacy arm. You can sign up for our subscriber updates. We send one maybe once a month, just talking about exactly this, what's been going on at the federal level, the state level, how you can get involved. So just updates like that. And then we have a whole tab that's endorsed legislation, and on there you can find who your legislator is. And so you can find that person. The best way to contact them is to give them a call. It seems intimidating. It's not. You either will leave a voicemail because no one will answer, or you'll be talking to a staff member, most likely, maybe even an intern, but whoever you talk to is important. And you just tell them how you feel about whatever topic it is, whatever pro-life issue it is. And so for this ACGME funding provision, we have a one pager on our website too that you can use to kind of refresh your memory right before you call or have some talking points. But essentially, all you need to do is tell them that you're a constituent. That's hugely important for them to actually hear what you have to say and take note and make sure it gets conveyed to the congressperson. But tell them you're a constituent, and then tell them that you are a physician or whatever your medical professional specialty looks like. That's, again, hugely important. Doctors' voices matter. Y'all's voices as medical professionals has such an impact on what is being decided on the policy realm. And then tell them that you support this language in the budget that would shift abortion training to opt-in rather than opt-out. And maybe that's all you want to say, and that's it, and that's great. They'll mark it down and they'll be done. They might also have questions for you. And again, just you don't need to be afraid if they ask questions. You can speak from your experience. You are the medical professional. You're going to 100% know more than they do about what this looks like. And actually, one question that we've heard a lot about this is if you shift abortion training back to opt-in versus opt-out, does that mean OBGYNs will not be trained in performing miscarriages, or I'm sorry, not performing in treating miscarriage care or caring for ectopic pregnancies? And the answer is no, right? And so you will have this opportunity to share with them what that actually looks like, what that training shifting back to opt-in would actually look like, and what will still be provided for and you will be trained in versus not. And so things that the rest of us, right, as I'm a policy person, that I don't know those things, you do. And so it's so important to make your voice heard in the simple way of giving a phone call and telling your position on this. Another thing is that we want to be a resource for you. So if you have a question or you aren't exactly sure what to say, you can reach out to us on our contact tab on applog-action.org. You can email that email or give us a call. And we have some trainings coming up too, where we will help equip you to testify at your state capitol, federally, also just kind of coach you through what giving a call looks like to your Congress member, or what sending an email can look like. And then other trainings too on the media front and the legal front and things like that. And so we have several of those coming up, and we want to help you be a resource to make your voice heard, because it's so important. It's one of the most important voices at this moment is medical professionals advocating in the policy space for life-affirming medicine.
Absolutely. And, I'll just reiterate what Rebecca said in that our medical voices are so important right now. Since the Dobbs decision, we've heard so much medical misinformation, and we've seen many of the medical organizations like ACOG and the AMA come out with just grossly inaccurate statements about induced abortion and about how the medical profession feels. And so if our policymakers are not hearing from us, they're going to assume that ACOG's position is how everybody practices and how everybody feels. And we know that that is not the case. We know that they don't represent many of you who are listening or watching this podcast. So it's really important that your policymakers hear from you. If you're interested in some of our trainings, you can sign up on the website. I'll just give you a quick rundown of the dates. We've got a virtual one coming up on Saturday, August 9th. We also have an in-person one in Kansas City on September 2nd before the Catholic Medical Association conference. And then we will be having an in-person one in Nashville on October 25th. So there's 3 more opportunities for you this year to receive this training so that we can help empower you to be able to speak to your policymakers. But as Rebecca said, especially on this GME funding issue, so that we can ensure that our medical trainees are not being pressured to do abortion, that just requires a phone call from you to your legislators. And we'll encourage you to start with your U.S. representative in the House, because that's where this budget will start. And so we encourage you to reach out. And again, if you need some help with that, feel free to contact us. We just encourage you to use your voice in whatever way you can, so that we can make a difference for ensuring that life-affirming medicine is available to all of our patients moving forward. We know that that is something that they are looking for. So, Rebecca, thank you so much. I feel like this was a whirlwind. I know we went a little bit longer than we normally do on this podcast, but there was so much to catch people up on. So thank you for joining us, Rebecca, and thank you for representing all of our members as you do so well in the policy realm.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. And thank you to all of our listeners for joining us today. If you liked this episode, please be sure to give us a like and subscribe on YouTube. Or if you're listening on any of the podcast apps, please be sure to give us a 5-star review so that we ensure that lots of other people get to hear this important content as well. We're so thankful for all of you. And just to give a quick shout out to all of you who joined with us as partners on our Day of Giving a couple of weeks ago. Thank you so much for helping us get close to reaching our goal. We raised over $225,000 from nearly 250 donors, which was really amazing for our first ever Day of Giving. So thank you so much to those of you who partnered with us either for that or have partnered with us in the past. Thank you to our members. We couldn't do what we do without you. We are here for you, here to defend your practice and to represent you as well. Please be sure to join us for our next episode next week.